Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the architecture and file structure quickly. All of our consoles have a built-in default app set of soft keys, programmed by the software developer as mentioned before. These can be edited in their respected Eucon application, which then makes them become a user app set. Artist, S3, Dock, and Control app all use uControl as their editor, and S6 uses its own built-in editor. So let's talk a little bit about the two types of XML files we have that make up an app set. We have default app sets and user app sets. So default app sets are the XML files that are updated with Eucon versions and are what the default is restored from. User app sets contain all of the soft keys that you create for each application. These are never altered by the software and can be taken with you between workstations if you like. Let's take a quick look at their locations. Default app sets on the Mac are located here in Application Support, Euphonics, SQRL. And the user app sets are located over here in the MC user set root folder. None of these are hidden folders, so they're really easy to get to. If you're not running Time Machine, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and grab the user app set every so often if you're modifying your own soft keys. Let's take a quick look on the Windows side. Default app sets are again in the SQRL folder, while the user app sets are over here in the MC user set root folder. Note that the app data folder is a hidden folder, so you're going to need to turn off hidden folders in Windows. See Professor Google for instructions on how to do that if you're not familiar already. Now let's take a quick look over at S6. Now, S6 uses its own built-in editor, right? Default and user app sets are all saved on the S6 rather than on your computer, as it was with uControl. In S6 2.1 and above, you can now save and load your soft keys directly from the master module for easy portability and backup. This is a preferred method, but if you need to access that XML file for whatever reason, they are located here in the app sets folder, and again over here in the program data app sets folder. Again, you're going to notice that the program data folder is hidden, so you're going to need to turn off hidden folders again. So now we know what kind of files are created, what their purpose is, and where they are. We have a pretty good foundation. Now let's actually talk about what we can do with them, all right? So soft keys can control more than just the Euconized objects that we talked about before. You can see them all down here at the bottom, right? They can also control QWERTY keystrokes, soft key navigation commands, layouts, and wheel commands. You can also program modifier keys to effectively multiply the number of soft keys you have available. Consoles using uControl have a single shift modifier, while S6 uses shift, control, option, and command modifiers, which can be used individually or in multiple combinations, giving you 14 soft key possibilities on a single switch. It's just crazy. Let's take a closer look at the uControl editor, all right? So up here at the top, you're going to notice the application that the uControl editor is focusing on. This is important because if you happen to tab away from the application that you're working on, that you're building soft keys for, this will change and you'll no longer be building keys for that application. Or you might notice that all of your Eucon commands have disappeared when you go back to the editor. You're also going to notice up here in this particular instance that I have a little asterisk by the XML file name. This is actually the XML file that we were talking about earlier, the user app set. That little asterisk appears once you start editing a default app set, or your user app set for that matter. You're also going to notice that the save and revert keys become available. Save just saves the work that you're doing. Revert allows you to go back to the previously saved app set before you hit save. So if you've already hit save and you realize you totally just mucked up your app set, then the only real way to go get it back is to either A, rebuild, or B, hopefully you're running Time Machine or some other backup software to go and put it back in its proper folder. Restore over here is what's going to restore the default app set. So it's going to take it back down to ground zero. It's going to take it back to what we've built. Let's take a quick look over here at the section. This is where you're going to choose the surface that you want to modify. Shift over here is the modifier key that I was talking about earlier. This is going to be what allows you to build a second set of soft keys for a single switch. We'll look at that in a little bit more detail once we get into the examples. Some soft keys have multiple pages that are available, located right here, plus and minus, adds or subtracts pages to your heart's content. Over here, command is going to be where you find your Eucon commands, your query commands, your navigation commands, etc., etc. And then over here, the soft key label, icon, font, and color. Those are all going to be for what is displayed on your control surface if your soft key actually has a display available for it. Not all soft keys have displays available for them. So I think it's all pretty straightforward, but I just wanted to gloss over it really quickly. So let's take a look at the S6. The editor is located under the Settings Soft Keys tab. You can get to the following, you can edit the following pages on the S6. You can edit the master module soft keys, the automation module soft keys, but you can also edit the transport, numeric keypad, and wheel commands. You can obviously modify the commands that we have built, but you can also, add modifier keys to any of them to add multiple layers to any of the default app set. You can also create new pages or keys, but just keep in mind on the S6 world, if you're going to be creating new pages, you are definitely going to want to be creating navigation keys down here so you can get to and from these pages from other soft key pages. You're going to notice also that we've built 3 user pages that are in the automation right section so that you actually don't have to build the navigation commands. They're already available. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into some examples. So I want to talk a little bit about the process of coming up with these examples. I think it's really easy to just see me demonstrate these and not actually see the thought and process that goes in behind the scenes. To create these, I first think of common tasks that I do repetitively while I'm working. Then I reference the Eucon commands and the QWERTY shortcuts available for Pro Tools. Sometimes I come up with workable scenarios, and other times I just don't, just due to software limitations or hardware limitations. But for me, at the end of the day, the time that I invest in creating these has paid off in the time savings that I get while I'm working, and I also find it kind of challenging and rewarding at the end of the day to kind of create these. So, okay, so in all of my examples here, I've broken them down really into 2 categories, workspace and macros. So my workspace soft keys are made up of several elements. They're made up of markers, mainly for zoom, track hide, and show hide functionality. They're made up of Windows configurations to change the layout of my screen. They're made up of layout recalls to change the channel strips that are on my surface. Soft key pages that I've built determined on the action that I'm trying to execute, so editing, mixing, etc., etc. And then just some miscellaneous options as well, such as scrolling options, automation display options, so on and so forth. And then the macros, I built those to execute a series of Euconized parameters to execute a single task. So here we go. So we'll look over here at my Pro Tools session over here. In UControl, I've gone ahead and created some layouts are some soft keys over here. We're just going to call this one OMF. I've created it on the shift layer of Eucon on the view keys of my S3, just because in my mind that makes sense to me, right? I went ahead and put it on the shift layer because it's something that I don't need to access often, but definitely need to access every so often. So putting it on the shift layer for me made sense in my mind. Let's go ahead and just go back over here to Pro Tools, and I'm going to execute my OMF soft key. So you're going to notice a bunch of things happen, right? All of my main tracks, my working tracks, if you will, get much smaller. I've hidden all of my record tracks, my reverbs, all of my VCAs, all of my auxiliary masters, etc., because I don't need to be bothering with them while I'm prepping a session. And then all of my OMF tracks down here, they've just gotten a little bit bigger so I can kind of see the regions and know how I want to group them and know how I want to pull them up into my session. You'll also notice that I've zoomed out so I can see pretty much an entire act all at once. So let's go take a little bit closer look at what all went into creating that sort of a trigger. So if you look over here in the command section, it's made up of this P10P kind of thing, these keystrokes. So the /P indicates a numeric keypad command. If you actually go over here to insert special, you see the whole list of them come up over here, right? So if you'll recall from the Pro Tools QWERTY shortcuts on the numeric keypad, .10 would be recalling marker number 10. In this case, if we come back over to Pro Tools, you'll see that that's what marker number 10 is for me. If we look a little bit closer at that marker, you're going to see all it's recalling are zoom settings, some track show hide settings, some track height settings, and then some Windows configuration settings. The Windows configuration doesn't do that much for me in this particular example other than show the I/O and panning information. I don't really need to see that while I'm editing and mixing. I have other places to see that. So for me, once I go into edit mode, mix mode, I like to just hide that with another Windows configuration. You're also going to notice up here in the time properties, I don't have a marker or selection indicated. I just have none. Why that's important is because I can be anywhere in my timeline and trigger this marker, and it's not going to take me to a new location in time. It's just going to change all of these elements down here that I've indicated I want it to remember, and not move my cursor around. So I can be in Act 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It doesn't matter. Trigger this marker, and the only thing that is going to change are these properties right here. So anyway, I think it's super powerful just on its own, but incredibly powerful once we start combining it with these soft keys. All right, so we talked a little bit about the marker that gets recalled. I also have a jump to page. So this is jumping to a soft key page that I have created for my control app running on my iPad. If we go take a quick look at it, we're on page 37. So it's just some soft keys that I've created. They're nothing complicated. They're not macros. They're not big workspace things. They're just keys that I often am using in this type of environment. I think this is important to note because when you're customizing your console, it doesn't mean you have to do all these big crazy things that I'm kind of showing. It also just means finding individual, actions that you do often and putting them in a single location so you're not having to tabinate, through multiple pages to get to it. So anyway, some of the ones that I've chosen here are clear clip gain, clear automation, clear pan automation, and then of course import session data, import audio, and import video. And then of course save, because saving is incredibly important, especially when you're prepping a new session. So let's go back to our views over here and continue looking at what all made up this workspace soft key. So we got our jump to page. I'm also recalling a layout for my surface. This is a pretty simple one. Nothing terribly exciting. A whole bunch of auto-assigned tracks, and then a couple of tracks that I have locked to the last two strips on my surface. Then if we come over here, I also have no scrolling built in. This isn't terribly important, other than once I am mixing, I am scrolling. So if for whatever reason I don't get, let's just say I don't get all of my acts at once or something like that, and I have to go from mixing back to an OMF type environment, I want to make sure that I'm turning scrolling off, so that while I'm working, everything is kind of staying in one spot. Because for me, when I'm prepping, I don't want my screen moving around. So that's pretty much for the OMF side of things. Let's take a look at the next one that I created, which is just this default one over here on the View 1 key, right? Just over here. So let's take a look back over here at Pro Tools, and I'm going to go ahead and trigger that default. You're going to notice immediately that a lot of tracks just get bigger. We're way zoomed in now, whereas before we were zoomed very far out, so we could see the whole act. If we scroll down here, you're going to see that I have access to a bunch of my VCAs, all of my reverbs, all of my aux masters, some fold down tracks, my record tracks, and then here are all of my OMF tracks way down at the bottom. I do kind of like to keep them up while I'm editing, just in case I messed up while I'm bringing a clip or something like that up to the top, and just have really easy reference to hop down to the very bottom and see if I forgot something, or if that's really all the clips that they gave me, so on and so forth. So again, a lot of zoom settings, a lot of Windows configuration settings. So let's just take a quick look at what we did. So again, we recalled a marker, numeric marker number 7, right, on the numeric keypad, period 7 period. We also recall another layout on my surface, just one that I call default. Again, it's pretty straightforward. Most things are all auto-assigned except for another track that I have all the way locked on the last strip. We're also jumping to another page that I have created for the control app on my iPad. We're going to go look at that in a little bit more detail in a second, because I have a macro that I've built over there that I actually want us to take a closer look at. Again, I have no scrolling turned on because while I'm editing, I don't really want to be scrolling. And then you may have noticed that I also had the automation lanes turn on, and then I turned them off. When I'm editing, I don't really want to see the automation lanes, but at least in the manner in which I work, I'm oftentimes hopping back and forth between editing and mixing. While I'm mixing, I definitely want to see my automation lane, but when I hop back over to editing, I don't. So technically, this is used as a toggle in this instance. So if I'm going from mixing back over to editing, it will be turning off. If I'm going from editing, where it's not shown, to mixing, it'll be turned on. Conveniently enough, if I go back into the Pro Tools environment and I just tap that View 1 key, all it's going to be doing, it'll be triggering everything else, but since they're all already recalled, the only thing that's changing is going to be my automation lanes, right? Apparently I haven't done a lot of automation in this little sequence. So let's go take a closer look at this surface recall on the control app. We're on page 5. So again, just some really simple Eucon keys that I had gone ahead and created that I like to use. Previous clip, next clip, and then clip gain up and down. I have a tabbed transient over here that's created, which is what I really want to talk about. And then I have these two little do selected and to trim keys that I'm still trying to work out, that I think I'll actually talk about in a little bit more detail a little later. So let's look at this tabbed transient. So I don't know about you guys, but when I'm working, I oftentimes get clips like this that I have a whole lot of just tone at the top. Sometimes I'll do a nice long fade in, but at least for this particular show, I like to trim them nice and tight. So it's not terribly difficult, for me to come over here and trim it and just draw a fade. That's not a big deal. But when I'm staring down the barrel of doing this over and over and over and over again, the repetitiveness starts to get a little bit daunting, and taking the time to actually build a macro gets to be a whole lot more appealing. So let's go take a look at it, what I've done. So I've built this tab to transient macro. Basically what it's doing is turning the tab to transient on. It tabs to the first clip boundary, then it tabs to the first transient. It draws a fade in, it nudges 2 frames backwards, and then it trims that faded region, and then it turns tab to transient off. So it's like 7 things, all that I only have to press 1 button for. So if you come over here, and I'm just going to move my marker before the clip, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to hit my tab to transient, and boom, there it goes. Pull it back out again. Tab to transient, and there it goes. You'll notice up here, the tab to transient key is going to turn on and then turn off. I don't like working with tab to transient on. I find it gets in the way. I tend to use tab also as a navigator to hop around between clips, like clip boundaries, and having tab to transient on gets in my way. All right, so let's move on to a little bit of workspace, a little bit of a mixing workspace. So I'm just going to go ahead and recall it since I'm still in Pro Tools. And you're going to notice all of my my main sections here, all my main tracks here just get shrunk down to a medium. All my automation lanes get recalled. My sound effects tracks here get shrunk because I don't necessarily need to see them as much as when I'm editing them, at least for this particular show. And then everything else just kind of stays the same. So let's go take a quick look at what makes up this workspace. So again, you'll never guess, we're recalling a marker. We're turning on my automation lanes. I'm turning on my continuous scrolling because, like I said, when I mix, I want to be able to scroll. I'm recalling a new layout on my surface, which contains all of the VCAs that I like to access, which in this case isn't too many, just 4. And everything else is just auto-assigned. And then it's also going to jump to a new page on the control app, right? So let's go take a quick look at that. Page 1. So again, to my point before, on this page, I've created a bunch of soft keys that are simple soft keys. They're just actions that I use often when I'm mixing. My preview, my suspend preview, my punch preview, my right to selected, suspend automation. All of these keys are actions that I found myself hunting for and using often, and I wanted to put them all in one place. So I just took the first page of the default app set and I mostly mutilated it. I just changed it to what worked best for me. The macro that I built in this case is more for when I'm done mixing. And I called it this clip rename macro over here. When I am done mixing in Pro Tools, I print all of my deliverables within my session, right? So in this particular show, it's 6 acts long. I got 4 deliverables per act. Nothing terrible, but as you know, it always, whenever we record in Pro Tools, it always puts this little _01 under it, which is convenient for certain things, but when I'm having to deliver to a client, I don't want that to be there. Again, it's easy enough to just go double click on the region, and go delete those and go through every single one of the clips. But for me, I got a bunch of them, and there are, shows where I have even more deliverables. Then I don't want to sit here for 15, 20 minutes doing that. So I came up with this little clip name macro. Basically, what it is doing is it is selecting the next clip. Then it is opening the rename dialog box. Then it's going to the end of that name and deleting the last 3 characters and then hitting enter. So let's see it in action. So like I said before, you'll notice the little _01 over here. So we're just going to come over here and hit clip rename. Bam, done. Hit it again. It's going to go to act 2. So you notice now act 2 is nice and clean. We're going to hit it again. And now Act 3 is nice and clean. We're going to hit it again. And Act 4 is now nice and clean. And then anyway, in just a couple of seconds, I've renamed all of my, my entire set of deliverables. And for me, that is incredibly powerful and a huge time saver. So that pretty much wraps it up on what I have for the U-Control side. Let's try and do some S6 examples. Now, S6 is obviously a little bit more complicated because it's its own console, and it's hard to hook up a console to a WebEx demo. But I have a little S6 circulator over here. So we're going to see if we can get it to play nice. So here's the S6 GUI for the master module. Let's go ahead and launch WS Control and see if everybody plays nice the way it's supposed to. So again, all of the stuff that we did in U-Control is very doable on the S6 side. So I've gone ahead and created a couple of these same macros with a little bit of a twist on the S6 side. All right, here we go. So as I said before, everything that we did on the U-Control side can be done on the S6 side. Get out of here. So let's go take a look at the soft keys section on the S6. We're going to look at the automation module soft keys, and we're going to navigate over to the user keys, which is where I went ahead and created these couple of macros. So on user page 1, I went ahead and created a similar OMF workspace key. I've got it recalling my my macro or my marker. I've also got it recalling a page of soft keys, this edit 1, which will show up on the left-hand side of the soft keys, right? The soft key page that we've already built. And then I also just have it recalling some no scrolling, right? So not quite as in-depth as the other one, but just a little bit different. What else I've also done is on the shift layer of this key is I've built in my import session data key. So on that same user window, I can just hold the shift key down, and now all of a sudden my OMF workspace switch now becomes my import session data switch. So less thinking. I can just know that that switch is always going to be effective for me when I'm doing OMFs. Also on the alt layer, I went ahead and pulled in my import video, because for me, when I'm prepping a session, that's what I'm doing mostly, is importing OMFs, AFs, and importing video files. So pretty straightforward. You can do the same sort of things with the edit and mix ones. What I really wanted to talk about on the S6, however, was the locate, was the keys, the numeric keypad over here, right? So on the default app set, we took the shift layer of the numeric keypad, and you're going to see it already is recalling all of these automation pages, right, for the different soft key pages on your S6. So all 4 of those displays are going to be changing depending on which workspace you're recalling. So I believe this one is for automation, right? So it's kind of like it's more for a mixing kind of thing. Really, really handy on its own. We're just going to take it one more step further, right? So if you slide all of these guys over to the left a little bit, you're going to notice we have a whole lot more room to create more keystrokes. So I went ahead and added in a Windows configuration recall here. I've also added one of my marker recalls here. I've also added in a scrolling recall here. Since this is all automation, for me this is in mixing world. And then I've also gone ahead and turned on the automation lanes. You're going to notice the one thing that I didn't do in this particular instance that I was able to do on all of the U-Control ones is actually create a layout recall on my surface. Currently on S6, you can't recall layouts to your Surface with a soft key. You have to do it from the layouts switch, which is a little bit of a bummer because it could be really powerful for you to be able to do it in a workspace type macro like this, like we've been talking about. The good news is that really shortly, I believe in the next release, you're going to be able to do that. So you don't have to hold out too much longer.